Good morning, students, and once again I welcome you back to the English session. Today we are going to do the concluding paragraphs of this chapter. But before we continue with that, let's have the feedback. What we people have studied till now. Till now, we people have seen that this chapter, the last lesson, the beautiful title, renders a very beautiful message to each and every human being, not to take things for granted in life. We came across a boy named Franz and his French teacher M. Hamel. The story is all about France, especially about the districts Alaska and Lorraine. After the French people got defeated and lost the battle to the Germans imposed an order that only German language will be taught in the schools of Alaska and Lorraine, two of the districts of France. This was like a thunderbolt for them. And France, that very morning, got up late, was worried, frightened, because he was not prepared for his French classes, as was directed by his French teacher M. Hamel. But still, overcoming all kind of temptations, he gathered his strength and rushed towards the school. On the way, he came across the bulletin board, about which he said that maximum bad news came through that board. He met one of the blacksmith named Mr. Watcher on the way with his apprentice, asking him not to hurry for the school. But paying no heed, he moved towards the school and he found a lot of unusual things on that day. The usual bustle was not there. No noises from the school, opening, closing of desk, unison reading, wrapping of the ruler, nothing. He asked for his teacher's permission to get inside the classroom. He blushed, he was frightened. He was permitted by his teacher, which was a surprise for him. He came and sat down in his place. After he calmed down, he found that more surprises were waiting for him. The next one was his teacher's outfit, which was something which his teacher used to put on only on special days. Then the last benches, which generally were empty, were now occupied by the village elders. Numerous were sitting down there, former mayor, postmaster, and many more. He was totally shocked. He was pondering why all these things are happening today. He don't know. At that time, M. Hamel took his seat and he addressed the class. He said that today was going to be the last French class because the Germans have passed an order that only German language will be taught in the schools of Alaska and Lorraine. So today is going to be the last French class. This was like a thunderclap for our little Franz, because he don't know how to read and write French. So he was totally shocked that how come French language come to a stop. And suddenly things started changing, or you can say that his outlook changed towards school life, M. Hamel. His books started feeling like old friends, like how you don't want to leave your friends with whom you had been in friendship for long years. Suddenly he felt his grammar book, his history book were old friends which he don't want to lose. He started regretting not attending the classes, instead going seeking for birds' eggs, sliding down the saw. And M. Hamel, his ruler, his crankiness, all seemed to be okay for France. He never wanted to lose M. Hamel. The next para which I told you people to pay attention was about why the village elders were there. The village elders were there because 3 points I told you why they were there. First one was out of regression or guilt. that why they never attended or they studied when time was there. Second one was out of mark of respect for M. Hamel's 40 years of service. And the last one was respect for the country which was no longer theirs. Then we came across when Franz was asked by M. Hamel to recite the participles. He stood up and was filled with shame, with guilt. He held his head down, holding the desk tight, ashamed. And even he said he could have given off anything to say the first word of this participle. But time never waits for anyone. M. Hamel, he didn't scold Franz. Instead, he said that this is what the problem is with we people. We always keep on postponing. Yesterday, I told you the word procrastination, the act of postponing everything to tomorrow, thinking that we have tomorrow in our hand. And I told you, we cannot think and live thinking that there is a tomorrow. And then he said, Alaska had always been postponing her studies, her learning to tomorrow. So there are a lot of things that they have to change, they have to rebuild. Then we came across the para which I told you to again pay attention, because there it is being said by M. Hamel, whom he hold responsible for the negligence on the part of Franz and his type of students' studies. Obviously, the students were responsible, but mainly he held two people responsible. First, the parents of the children, who were more interested in earning money than sending the children for studies. So they were more eager to send them to industries, mills, or otherwise farms to earn more money. Second was M. Hamel himself, who used to ask them to water the plants instead of learning. And whenever he wished, like going for fishing, he used to give holiday to them. Like this, from one thing to another, he kept on talking, and he said the French is the most beautiful, most clear, and most logical language. He also said that language is a key to the prison for a person. I gave you an example also in yesterday's session. And then he took out the grammar book and started reading. Franz, he says to his surprise, he understood everything. It was like never ever he had so patiently heard the classes, nor M. Hamel have so patiently taught the class. It was like M. Hamel wanted to teach them everything in very one day before he goes, in one stroke. After this feedback, let's continue with the chapter. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day, M. Hamel had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round hand, Franz Lasky, Franz Lasky. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desks. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Once, some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them, not even the littlest ones, who worked right on tracing their fish hooks, as if that was French too. On the roof of the pigeons cooed very low, and I thought to myself, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? After the grammar class, it was supposed to be writing, and that day M. Hamel, he brought new copies for every one of us. And in very beautiful handwriting, he has written Franz Lasky, Franz Lasky. Franz describes this beautiful handwriting and the words in a very beautiful manner. He says that when he looked into the book, onto those words, it looked like as if though the flag of France was floating everywhere in the classroom, hung from the corner of a rod on top of their desk. And then everyone set to work. It was very quiet. The only sound which could be heard in the classroom was the scribbling of the pen over the pages. And no one was paying attention to anything else, even the small ones also. He says that once some beetles came inside. Beetles, type of insects having big polka dots on the top. They flew and came inside. Nobody paid attention, not even the small ones also. They were also very busy doing some tracing on their fish hooks, and it was like as if though that is also French and they want to extract everything from there. At that very moment, on the roof of the school, the pigeon cooed, and then a question raised, or you can say that a line of thought passed by his mind. He asked to himself, okay, after the victory, the Germans have imposed that German language must be taught in our schools. But can they stop these pigeons from singing? Or can they ask the pigeons to sing in German language? It was just a thought which passed by his mind. A line of thought. Let us continue. Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw M. Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Fancy, for 40 years he had been there in the same place, with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. Just like that. Only the desks and benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hop vine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all. Poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country next day. My dear students, you are in 12th standard. A few months and then you will be getting ready for your next venture. When you will be about to leave the school and go, the feeling of this M. Hamel will be understood by you at that moment. When you spend years in a place, you fall in love with that place, and then it's time for you to go, leaving everything. The same thing M. Hamel was passing by. Franz says that when they were busy writing, in between he used to lift his head and look at M. Hamel and found him gazing somewhere in the infinity. Like he was gazing, but his mind was thinking of something else. It looked like as if though he was using his eyes like a camera to capture all the images around him forever in his mind and his heart. And then Franz said, it's really so odd. It is really so surprising that he had spent 40 years in that school, in the very same place. That same garden, the same classroom, the same door, the same window. But still how he is looking at each and everything like he want to capture them in his mind forever. He says, yes, with the passage of time, the benches and desks have worn out. The walnut tree which was there outside, small, has become taller now. And the hop vine, kind of a vine climber, which he himself, M. Hamel himself, has planted, that plant has now grown up so much that it has twisted round the window and then gone up to the roof. And he said he could understand very well how broken M. Hamel might be feeling. And above the classroom, in the room, he could feel his sister moving about, packing up their trunks because they were supposed to leave the country the next day. It was really a bad time. It was really a moment which was difficult to bear for M. Hamel. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their ba, bee, bee, bo, boo. Down there at the back of the room, old Hosser had put on his spectacles and, holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion, and it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Ah, how well I remember it, that last lesson. Franz says, he describes his experience, his emotions, the mixture of feelings. The feeling where you want to cry and you want to laugh at this very same moment. He says that even after all those things which were going on, M. Hamel was having enough courage to listen to every lesson for the last. And after the writing lesson, there was a lesson of history, and then the small ones, they took out their book and then they read out the letters over there. And at the back, where the benches were occupied by the village elders, the old Hosser was sitting down, putting on his spectacles and holding the primer in both the hands, and along with the small ones, repeating the words. And while he was doing that, he was crying. Franz, he says that it was really a moment when every one of them found that situation funny as well as sad. They wanted to cry and laugh. And he says that all my life I will remember this last lesson. Further, all at once the church clock struck 12, then the Angelus. At the same moment, the trumpets of the Prussians, returning from drill, sounded under our windows. M. Hamel stood up, very pale, in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. While all this thing was going on, at that time the church clock struck 12, and then the Angelus. The bell rang for the prayer. And at that very moment, from the window side, he could hear the trumpet sound as the Prussians were coming back from their drilling session. Remember, I told you people in the beginning, near the sawmill, the Prussians, they used to drill, they used to practice. So they were coming back after their drill. And M. Hamel, suddenly he looked very pale. He stood up. And Francis says that never ever he had seen M. Hamel look so taller. These are all mixed emotions, my dear students, where departing, bidding farewell, is being portrayed to be a very painful moment. My friends, said he, I. But something choked him. He could not go on. Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Vive la France. When the trumpet blew, M. Hamel stood up, looking pale, looking tall, and then he addressed the people there. He said, my friends, I. But he got choked. He could not speak, could not continue talking. Then, instead, he turned towards the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and gathering all his strength, he wrote as big as he can, Vive la France. It means long live France. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed. You may go. After writing down Long live France as bold as he could, he stopped. His emotions choked him. He leaned his head against the wall, and without uttering a single word, he just made a gesture with his hand that school is dismissed, you may go. And the last lesson came to an end. My dear students, our life is unpredictable. We don't know what may happen tomorrow. So please, none of us